Of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe, with loss of Eden to one greater man, restore us and regain the blissful seed. The immortal first words from John Milton's epic poem Paradise Lost. With these words and imagery, it would obviously dawn on someone the similarities between Attack on Titan and this poem. With the show at its end, I'm sure a lot are asking what was the meaning of the dramatic conclusion, as well as the point. I hope I can share my interpretation in this transformative series in this video analysis titled Attack on Titan and the Reimagining of Paradise Lost. There's still a lot of unanswered questions in Attack on Titan, from the original existence of where Titans come from to the future in store for our protagonists. With any working theory, there could be holes or inconsistencies, but some coincidences cannot simply be ignored. The first being the most obvious in my opinion, Ymir acquiring the founding Titan by falling into a great tree. Reminiscent of Alice discovering Wonderland, or perhaps more appropriately, would be Eve discovering the Tree of Knowledge and partaking from the forbidden fruit. Ymir suddenly cast from the mortal plane upon her death to a purgatory-like setting across an endless desert, doomed to serve any man with royal blood. When Eve disobeyed God, she was condemned to a future of pain during childbirth, across her descendants, and to be subservient, like Ymir, to man. These mirrored origins between these two women might have you asking, well, what about Adam? Rightfully so, but for that we'd have to turn to Norse mythology, the original Ymir. According to the Poetica Edda, a collection of Old Norse narrative poems, Ymir was the ancestor of all Jotnar, or giants. A conscious decision most likely, but interestingly, Ymir was both a male and female, considering Adam was an individual being to begin with until God removed his rib to create Eve. It's not a stretch to say Ymir is both Adam and Eve in this modern retelling. Even more interesting, in the Poetica Edda, Ymir was killed by three gods, the brothers Odin, Vili, and Ve, and details that upon Ymir's death, her blood caused an immense flood. Which brings me to my next point. From you, 2,000 years ago, if the origin of Ymir could be compared to Genesis, the creation, Adam and Eve, then where does that leave our protagonist/antagonist, Eren Yeager, and our genocidal conclusion with the Rumbling? The eradication of the majority of population has some very similar chain of events to a story from the same book of Genesis, Noah's Ark, the great flood that God rained down across 40 days and 40 nights. In Genesis 6:5-7 recites the following: The Lord saw how utterly wicked people on earth had become. Every thought was only evil all the time. So God said, I will destroy from the earth the people I have created, and with them the animals, birds, and creeping things. The history-changing events of the flood and the rumbling may have their differences, and many not so exact, but what if I told you the connection through space and time between Eren and Ymir was present in Paradise Lost as well? After the act of eating the forbidden fruit, God would forgive their sins, but first they are to be expelled from the garden. At first this fills them with grief, for the garden has been their source of delight and comfort, but soon they accept their fate with resignation. After this, Michael, the archangel, shows Adam a vision for the future of mankind. Their children and descendants, Cain and Abel, wars, the rise and fall of kingdoms, and then Noah, all the way to the second coming of the Messiah. To you, in 2,000 years. That number always stayed in my head. It's a pretty symbolic number. You know, it's easy to believe these could all be coincidences and get caught up in the patterns. I mean, the Bible adopts stories from past religions and stories, right? Well, that number hits me again with the realization. The timeline of events in Genesis sets Adam and Eve at over 4000 BC, and to my surprise places the events of the Great Flood at 2400 BC, roughly 2,000 years apart. It's pretty remarkable to find these numbers coinciding so well with this anime. Now, if you might not be completely convinced, I have one final point to make. As I just touched on earlier, Ymir from Norse mythology is an ancestor to all Jotnar, better described as giants. I'm sure, with the German influences throughout the show, Ymir was a direct result for deciding the origin. However, there is a big difference in how Ymir was conceived. In Attack on Titan, there is imagery of what appears to be Ymir striking a deal with a demon or some demon-like figure, even going on to referring to Eldians as devils. In the Poetica Edda, Ymir was the first being, a giant who was conceived from the drops of water that formed when the ice of Niflheim meet the heat of Muspelheim. No mention of demons or any other similar entity. So where do these inspirations come from? Well, right before the accounting of the flood, Genesis 6:4 recites, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of humans, who bare children to them. These were the heroes that were of old, warriors of renown." If you're not familiar with Nephilims, in the first books of Enoch, a non-canonical Jewish text, notes that the Nephilim were giants. The previous passage from Genesis can be ambiguous with the term sons of God, but some have understood it to be fallen angels, and the Nephilim are the offspring they produce with human women, which was further explained in the book of Enoch. The Nephilims being one of the reasons God sought to restart the earth, and a very familiar reason at that, mirrored by Eren Yeager's end result. The themes of Attack on Titan are that of free will and generational hate. Can cycles ever be broken? With the very last panels in the manga starting the origins of the Titans all over again. What would you say Eren's goals were? To put an end to the hate by making himself a martyr? Wouldn't death and destruction just cause more death and destruction in the end? John Milton's Paradise Lost sees these issues through the Great Fall, when Adam was given the sight of the future. It's this that leads Adam to comment that he doesn't know whether to regret his evil or feel gratitude for it. If evil can be utilized for the spiritual learning and redemption of man, then Satan has no hope whatsoever, because evil ceases to be evil. This justification is also clearly stated in the passages in which God speaks about free will. He says he's not responsible for the fall of angels or of man. He has given them all the gift of free will. He has told them what they must do and has given them what they need to do it. Eren sought to give his people free will by the heinous act he entrusted upon himself, an act he felt he had no choice but to make. So in turn, was Eren the only one who was never truly free? The fall and the rumbling gave man the opportunity to better himself. Innocence is a virtue, but the humility and shame that comes with sinning opens the way for far greater virtues: tolerance, compassion, and understanding. These virtues are almost impossible for innocents to obtain, because an innocent has no way of understanding suffering or people's weaknesses. This is why both stories' endings are ultimately a happy one. Through an act of evil, their own consciousness has been broadened, and a new life will be made possible. Thank you to everybody who took the time to watch. I've been wanting to make these videos for some time now, and finally decided to put it out. If you enjoyed it, then consider subscribing, because I have more videos coming out, hopefully weekly. Videos like Better Call Saul and the Partialness of Justice, Breaking Bad and the Sense of Ambiguity, BoJack Horseman and Death's Door, and Ozark and Why Money Costs Too Much. If there's anything you'd like me to talk about, please tell me in the comments section. And again, thanks for watching.